The stars were calm, almost too calm, when the enemy fleet entered the Sol system. Inside Earth's defense ship Resolute, the crew felt the air grow heavy. No one said it out loud, but every officer knew what this day meant. Either humanity survived, or it vanished forever. Commander Arif Keller stood in the center of the bridge. He watched the hollow screen without blinking. It showed 312 Vorgoth battleships moving in perfect formation. Their red engine trails looked like long blades slicing the darkness. Everyone in the galaxy feared the Vorgoth Empire. Everyone except, maybe, Arif. Around him, officers rushed from panel to panel. Some whispered numbers. Some tapped shaking fingers on consoles. Even the ship's lights seemed nervous, flickering softly as if they understood the danger. Rena, the helmsman, swallowed hard. Commander, enemy distance is closing. 5 million kilometers. 4.8, 4.5. Her voice tried to stay steady, but fear pressed on her throat. Another officer turned pale as a weak signal flashed across his screen. Sir, incoming broadcast. A deep, thunderous voice cut across the bridge speakers. It felt like it pressed down on every chest in the room. Human race. This is your final moment. Kneel, surrender, or be removed from existence. Some officers froze. One man looked down at his shaking hands. Another woman whispered quietly to herself. The Vorgoth were known for destroying entire planets in hours. Their ships were massive, old, and tested through centuries of war. They laughed at human weapons. They called human technology weak fire and metal toys. Today, they expected to laugh again. Arif Keller did not care about their laughter. His eyes were calm. Too calm. Distance? He asked. Rena checked again. 3 million kilometers, sir. The enemy ships grew on the screen. Dark giants covered in glowing symbols, carrying weapons strong enough to melt mountains. The Resolute, compared to them, looked like a small knife facing an army of tanks. Arif finally spoke. Bring the Railgun online. The entire bridge went silent. The Railgun. The most mocked weapon in the galaxy. Aliens called it old, outdated, primitive. They said humans fired metal slugs because they had no real energy weapons. But Arif knew something the galaxy did not. Earth had changed the Railgun. Earth had turned it into something new. Something deadly. An engineer whispered, Sir, if the Railgun fires at full power, the recoil. We tested it, Arif replied. That was at 50%, the engineer said. Arif didn't blink. Today, we fire at 100. The bridge felt colder. The crew ran to their stations. Panels lit up blue. Warning lights flashed across the Railgun chamber. A low rumble echoed through the ship, like an ancient beast waking. Rena stared at the screen. 2 million kilometers. Vorgoth are charging their plasma storm cannon. That cannon was famous. One shot could erase everything in a 50-kilometer radius. Ships. Stations. Even small moons. The Vorgoth were gathering energy for it now. Arif looked at them without fear. Target their flagship. Officers froze. Targeting the flagship first was madness. No species ever tried to break a Vorgoth flagship shield. It had 8 layers, each stronger than the last. No Railgun shot has ever broken even 3 layers, an officer warned. This one will, Arif said. His voice was steady, as if he already knew how the battle ended. Engineers increased the power. The hum grew louder. The Resolute shook. Lights flickered. Energy readings climbed so fast one screen cracked. Arif kept watching the enemy. They were close enough now to fill the entire hollow screen. 300 red glowing monsters moving with slow, deadly confidence. Target locked, Rena said. Vorgoth flagship charging main cannon, another officer added. They will fire in 30 seconds. Everyone waited for Arif's order. Arif Keller took a slow breath. Then he said the word that changed history. Fire. There was no explosion. No bright flash. Only a quick silver streak that the human eye could barely follow. The Railgun slug flew faster than any weapon ever created. Faster than the Vorgoth could track. Faster than their shields could react. At first, nothing happened. Then, The Vorgoth flagship's first shield layer rippled, then cracked, then burst like glass hit by a hammer. The second layer followed, then the third, then the fourth. The bridge fell silent as each shield broke like fragile crystal. The fifth layer went next, then the sixth. The seventh shattered with a booming echo across space. The eighth, the strongest shield in their empire, glowed bright red, resisted, and then collapsed in a ring of fire. The railgun slug hit the hull. Metal peeled apart like paper. A blinding white flash erupted from inside the ship. The flagship didn't explode. It folded in on itself. Its core cracked. Its engines dimmed. Then the entire ship broke apart into drifting pieces. Silence. Real, complete silence. 300 Vorgoth ships stopped moving. For the first time in centuries, the ancient empire looked afraid. Rena whispered, "Commander, they are not firing. They are frozen." Arif Keller finally spoke, his voice calm and cold. "Now they understand." The bridge crew stared at him in disbelief. The first shot of the battle had destroyed the strongest warship of a galactic empire, and humanity had just changed the balance of the stars. The Vorgoth flagship was gone, but the pieces of its broken hull still drifted across the void when shock hit the enemy fleet. For a long moment, not a single Vorgoth ship moved. Their formation, once perfect like a blade, was now frozen in fear. Inside the Resolute, the crew watched the screen in disbelief. Engineers stared at the readings, officers stared at each other, and no one breathed. Rena whispered, "Sir, they still are not reacting." Her voice held confusion, not confidence. Arif Keller kept watching the enemy ships. His expression didn't change, but the crew noticed his hands were steady. He wasn't surprised their shot had worked. He expected it. The silence ended suddenly when dozens of red signals flashed on the screen. "Commander," a sensor officer called. "We detect multiple transmissions from the Vorgoth fleet. They are calling for commands, but no one is answering." Of course no one answered. Their leader no longer existed. The Vorgoth High Council, sitting in their fortress world across the galaxy, received the news seconds later. Their control tower shook from the echo of the emergency alarms. Councillor Sharvok, an old war veteran, stood up so fast his chair slid across the floor. "Repeat that," he shouted. A smaller Vorgoth officer trembled as he read the message again. Human railgun slug destroyed the Emperor's flagship. All 8 shields gone. Core destroyed. No survivors. Sharvok slammed his fist against the table. "Impossible! Humans use metal sticks and magnets. Their weapons cannot touch Vorgoth hull." The council chamber filled with angry voices. Some demanded retaliation, some accused humans of cheating, some thought it was a trick. But one old counselor, eyes dark with fear, whispered the truth. This was no trick. They used force, raw force. We have grown comfortable. We forgot the power of simple weapons in skilled hands. No one wanted to hear that. Back near Earth, the enemy fleet finally began to move again. But they didn't charge. They backed away. On the Resolute, the bridge filled with disbelief. "Sir, they are changing formation," an officer reported. "They are retreating from firing range." Arif nodded slowly. "They are afraid." The words felt strange in the air. Nobody had ever said that about the Vorgoth Empire. But fear was clear in their movements. They were repositioning, spreading out, scanning for threats they never believed possible. The second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara, leaned closer to Arif. "Sir, should we fire again? If we hit another warship, we can end this whole fleet." Arif shook his head. "Not yet. They will make mistakes when they panic. Let them fear the next shot." The crew watched the Vorgoth ships continuing to shift. Their lights flickered like unstable stars. Several ships accidentally collided while trying to reposition. Their perfect discipline was gone. Another officer spoke up. "Commander, we captured the enemy transmissions. They are demanding answers about the railgun. They think we used forbidden technology." Arif almost smiled. "They are trying to explain it to themselves." The truth was simple. Humans had taken an old weapon and turned it into something new, something that ignored shields and armor. But the Vorgoth couldn't accept that. Their pride wouldn't let them believe that a young species could outdo them. Meanwhile, deep inside the fleet, a single red icon flashed on Rena's screen. "Sir," she said slowly, "one of their cruisers is powering up all weapons." Ariv looked at the display. The cruiser was shaking violently, pushing its engines too hard, struggling to aim. "They are panicking," Ariv said softly. "They do not know what to do. Fear is controlling them." The cruiser fired. A beam of blue plasma shot toward the Resolute, but the aim was rushed, wild, uncontrolled. The beam missed by thousands of kilometers. Rena exhaled. "They're not thinking clearly." Ariv placed both hands behind his back. "This is how empires fall. Not in one battle, but in one moment of fear." The enemy fleet still didn't attack together. They just drifted, unsure, confused, and desperately waiting for someone to take command. But no leader remained. On the Resolute, the tension grew heavier. The crew didn't know whether to feel proud, scared, or stunned. Mara finally spoke again. "Sir, what if they regroup? What if they decide to charge?" Ariv turned away from the screen. "They will. That is what makes this dangerous." He looked at the Railgun status panel. The weapon was still glowing from its first shot. The barrel was hot, nearly overloaded. "We cannot fire yet," Ariv said. "It needs time to cool." "And if they attack before it cools?" Mara asked. Ariv's voice stayed calm. "Then we fight with everything else we have." The crew exchanged nervous glances. Without the Railgun, the Resolute was strong, but not strong enough to face an empire alone. Rena's screen beeped sharply. "Commander! The Vorgoth fleet is receiving new orders from their homeworld." The bridge fell silent. Ariv stepped forward. "Put it on main display." The message came through, cold, ruthless, and full of rage. "All ships, destroy the human vessel immediately. No retreat. No surrender. For the Empire." Rena whispered the words no one wanted to hear. "Sir, they're coming." The enemy ships turned. Weapons charged. Engines roared. The pause was over. The real battle was about to begin. The Vorgoth fleet moved again, this time with purpose. Hundreds of red warships locked weapons on the Resolute, their engines glowing like burning suns. The silence of fear was gone. Now there was only rage. Inside the Resolute's bridge, the crew felt the pressure rising. Warning lights flashed. Sensors beeped non-stop. The ship shook from the growing energy around them. Rena spoke quickly. "Commander, they are charging all plasma cannons. They're preparing a full strike." Ariv Keller didn't move. His calm eyes stayed fixed on the display showing the Railgun status. The barrel was cooling slowly. Too slowly. Mara turned to him. "Sir, the Railgun needs at least 3 more minutes." Ariv nodded once. "We hold for 3 minutes." The crew exchanged worried looks. 3 minutes in a battle like this felt like a lifetime. The Vorgoth ships split into attack groups, surrounding the Resolute from multiple directions. Their tactics were sharp, fast, and deadly. This was the fighting style that had crushed entire civilizations. But Ariv wasn't focused on the enemy fleet. He was thinking about the secret behind the weapon that had shaken the stars. He remembered how it began. It wasn't built by a military team. It wasn't developed in a big laboratory. Earth's strongest weapon had come from a small group of scientists who worked in silence, hidden under a mountain on Earth. The project's name was simple. Project Stonebolt. People thought it was a mining experiment. No one cared about it. But that group, only 6 scientists, had discovered something strange years ago. Deep beneath the crust, in a forgotten cave, they found a metal that wasn't like anything known. A metal that reacted violently to magnetic force. A metal that stored energy like a star. A metal that refused to melt even in extreme heat. They called it V-core metal. The first time they placed it in a magnetic chamber, the walls cracked from the force. The second time, the entire facility shook. The scientists realized something frightening. If this metal was fired through a magnetic rail, the speed would break every limit known to physics. They worked in secret, night after night. They tested, failed, tested again. Then one day, The projectile smashed through 11 solid steel walls in a test bunker. It didn't slow down. It didn't deform. It didn't even heat up. Arif had seen the footage years ago. It still played in his head like a ghost. That was the moment he knew humans had something unique. Something no empire expected. Something the galaxy would not understand until it was too late. And that metal V-core was inside the railgun slug that destroyed the Vorgoth flagship minutes earlier. Back on the bridge, a loud warning suddenly blared. "They are in firing range," Rena shouted. Arif snapped back to the present. The enemy ships lit up across the screen like a sea of red stars preparing to strike. "Shields at maximum," Arif ordered. The Resolute's shield layers formed around the ship, glowing deep blue. But the crew knew the truth. Their shields were strong, just not strong enough to survive a full Vorgoth attack. "Plasma cannons reaching full charge," the sensor officer said. Mara stepped closer to Arif. "Sir, if all of them fire at once, we cannot survive." Arif didn't look at her. He only asked one question. "Railgun status?" The engineer replied with fear in his voice. "Still overheating. 2 minutes and 40 seconds before safe fire." Arif closed his eyes for one breath. One slow, steady breath. Then he opened them. "We hold." Outside the ship, the Vorgoth fleet formed a huge circle around the Resolute. It looked like a ritual, a storm gathering in every direction. The plasma storm cannons hummed, shaking the vacuum around them. Arif stood tall in the center of the bridge. This was the moment he had prepared for. His plan was simple. Survive long enough to fire one more shot. Just one. Another alarm rang. "Commander!" Rena shouted. "Enemy cruiser preparing to fire." A bright red glow gathered at the front of a battleship. Energy built, brighter and brighter. "Impact in 5 seconds," the officer yelled. The Resolute braced. But then, before the cruiser fired, another Vorgoth ship slammed into it from the side. The plasma shot exploded early, tearing through 2 of their own ships. Chaos. Pure chaos. The fleet was falling apart from fear. Mara's eyes widened. "They're losing discipline." Arif shook his head softly. "They are losing control." Another group of enemy ships tried to adjust their formation, but their movements were frantic. One ship crashed into another, causing a chain reaction of explosions. The crew could hardly believe it. Rena said in amazement, "Sir, they are fighting each other." Arif didn't smile. He knew fear could break empires in ways weapons never could. But the danger wasn't gone. The remaining ships were still charging their cannons. The engineer called out, panic in his voice. 1 minute 50 seconds until Railgun is ready. The entire bridge held its breath. The Vorgoth fleet steadied enough to fire again. Their cannons turned toward the Resolute. Rena whispered, "Sir, they're about to shoot." Arif Keller lifted his head. "Then we must survive 1 minute 50 seconds. No matter what it takes." The battle was about to explode, and the secret weapon of humanity needed just a little more time. The Vorgoth fleet finally recovered from its panic. The shock of losing their flagship was fading, replaced now by pure fury. The red glow of their engines grew brighter, and their warships moved like beasts waking from a deep sleep. Inside the Resolute, every screen flashed warnings. Rena gripped the controls. "Commander, they are closing in again. Formation tightening. This time, they are serious." Arif Keller stood firm in the center of the bridge. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, watching a storm he knew was coming. "How long until the railgun is ready?" he asked. The engineer, sweat on his forehead, checked the readings. 1 minute 10 seconds, sir. Too long. Mara stepped forward. "Sir, the enemy will fire before we can." Arif did not respond. He simply watched the massive circle of enemy ships surrounding them. 300 warships, all aiming at one human ship. The tension in the bridge felt like it could break metal. Then the sensors screamed. Beep, 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 beep. "Commander!" the sensor officer shouted. 20 Vorgoth cruisers charging plasma cannons. All aimed at us. Arif nodded once. "Brace for impact." The crew secured themselves. Rena locked the thrusters. Shield operators pushed power to maximum. The air filled with a low vibration as the Resolute's blue shield dome tightened. Outside, the Vorgoth cannons burst to life. Bright red plasma beams launched toward the Resolute like spears of fire. They hit. Boom. The entire ship shook. Panels cracked. Lights flickered. The Resolute's shields bent inward like a bubble pressed by a giant hand. Another wave of plasma hit. Boom. Crash. The lights went out for half a second. Sparks flew from one of the consoles. Shields at 70%. An officer shouted. Ariv stayed steady. Rena. Zigzag evasive pattern. Rena's fingers danced over the controls. The Resolute swerved sharply to the left. Then up, then right. The next set of plasma beams missed by kilometers. But the enemy fleet adjusted fast. Another blast hit the Resolute's side. Crash. Shields at 53%. The officer shouted. Ariv watched the railgun timer. 55 seconds. Mara shouted. Commander, we won't last that long. Ariv didn't turn. Then we buy time. He pointed at the thruster controls. Rena, take us toward the densest part of their formation. Rena froze. That is suicide. Do it, Ariv said calmly. Rena obeyed. The Resolute suddenly shot forward, heading toward the cluster of enemy cruisers. The Vorgoth ships didn't expect this. Their formation broke. Two ships swerved out of the way and collided, spiraling in flames. Another tried to dodge too late. Its wing clipped a nearby battleship, sending both spinning. Mara stared. Sir, they are falling apart. Ariv nodded. Fear makes them slow. Chaos makes them blind. But chaos was dangerous on both sides. The Resolute shook as small plasma beams scraped the shields. A deep alarm rang. Shields at 38%. Another blast hit the bottom hull. Boom. Panels blew open. A fire started near the communications console. Officers rushed with extinguishers. Ariv didn't blink. How long? The engineer read the display with fear. 33 seconds. The enemy ships, now fully regrouped, locked on again. This time all of them fired. A rain of plasma beams fell toward the Resolute. Rena shouted, Incoming! Too many to dodge. Ariv lifted his hand. Redirect power from engines to shields. The engines dimmed. The shields flared bright blue. Boom! The bridge shook so hard half the crew fell to their knees. Pieces of metal dropped from the ceiling. One screen shattered. The Resolute spun wildly, caught in the violent shockwave. Rena struggled with the controls. We're losing control. Ariv grabbed the railing. Hold steady. The ship slowly stopped spinning, stabilizing just in time to dodge a second volley. But the damage was clear. The shields flickered like dying sparks. Shields at 19%, the officer cried. One more hit and the Resolute would be torn apart. Ariv looked at the railgun timer again. 10 seconds. He exhaled once. Outside, the Vorgoth ships charged another full volley, this one meant to finish the job. 30 massive cannons glowed red-hot. Mara whispered, Sir, if they fire now, it's over. Ariv didn't answer. He watched the timer. 7 seconds. 6. 5. The enemy cannons reached full power. 4. 3. Ariv raised his hand. Prepare to fire. The railgun chamber glowed white-hot. Ooh! The Vorgoth fleet unleashed the final volley. A wall of red plasma shot toward the Resolute. 1. Ariv shouted. Fire! A blinding silver flash erupted. The railgun slug tore through space, straight toward the heart of the enemy fleet. And the screen turned white. For a moment, everything turned white. No one on the Resolute could see the enemy fleet. No one could see the plasma volley coming toward them. No one could see anything except the blinding light from the railgun firing at full power. The entire ship shuddered as if the universe itself had been punched. Then the white faded, and the crew saw the result. A silver streak, so fast it looked like a line drawn across the stars, shot straight into the center of the Vorgoth fleet. The impact hit a battleship dead on. Crash! The hit was so violent that the battleship didn't explode. It unraveled. Metal peeled, armor bent backward, and the ship's core burst open like a collapsing sun. The shockwave pushed nearby enemy ships away, throwing them off course. "Direct hit!" the sensor officer shouted. But Arif Keller didn't cheer. Something was wrong. He stared at the readings. The second shot hit, but the damage was different from the first time. "Commander," Rena said slowly, "the slug passed through, but not all the way." Arif nodded. "I see it." The railgun slug had pierced the battleship, but the strength of the hit was slightly lower. The railgun was hot. Too hot. The heat had reduced the power. The crew didn't know this yet. But Arif understood instantly. The railgun would not survive another full shot. Before he could speak, the bridge alarm screamed. "Beep, beep, beep." Mara shouted, "Commander!" Multiple enemy ships survived the shockwave. "They are turning toward us." The screen zoomed out. More than 200 Vorgoth ships still surrounded them. Stunned, frightened, but not broken this time. The fleet had learned. Their formations tightened faster. Their movements were sharper. Their panic was fading. "They adapted," Arif whispered. Unlike the first shot, the second didn't shatter their confidence. It scared them, but it didn't freeze them. One ship moved forward. Then 10. Then 50. All weapons glowing. The enemy fleet was coming again. Harder, angrier, more focused. The Resolute drifted, shields flickering. The engineer shouted, "Sir, the railgun coil is overheating. We cannot fire again." Arif already knew. "We won't fire again. Not now." Mara stepped forward. "Then how do we survive?" Arif watched the enemy ships growing on the screen like a red storm. He took a slow breath. This is the moment they want revenge. The enemy cannons charged. Crimson energy glowed across the fleet. Rena whispered, "They're preparing another full volley." The crew went completely silent. Every screen on the bridge went red. "Target locked. Target locked. Target locked." 300 enemy targeting systems were aimed at the Resolute. Arif lifted his head. "Rena, full power to engines." She hesitated. "Sir, without shields." "Do it." Rena pushed the controls forward. The engines roared to life. The Resolute jumped into motion. Fast, but not fast enough. The first plasma volley erupted. Red beams cut through space. One hit the rear shields. Boom! Shields dropped to 12%. Another beam grazed the left side, tearing a chunk of armor. A third beam struck the lower hull. Crack boom! The floor shuddered. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Arif shouted, "Get us out of the firing cone." Rena turned the ship hard to the right, dodging a cluster of shots. But the enemy adjusted instantly. More beams came. More lights flashed red. Mara shouted, "Commander, we can't dodge them all." Arif looked at the railgun status. Still hot. Still unstable. If it fired again, it could explode. Another plasma beam hit. Boom! A support pillar on the bridge cracked. Officers stumbled. One console burst into flames. "Shields at 4%, the operator cried. 4%. One more hit, and the entire ship would be torn apart. Rena screamed, "Incoming volley!" A wall of red light filled the screen. Arif Keller didn't blink. He gave one order. "Divert all power to thrusters. Maximum." Rena pushed the engines beyond limits. The Resolute lurched violently, engines burning with impossible force. The ship jumped upward, rolling sideways just as the plasma volley passed beneath it. The beams missed by meters. The bridge erupted in shock. "We're still alive," someone shouted. But Arif wasn't celebrating. He saw something on the tactical display. Something worse than all the plasma volleys. At the back of the enemy fleet, a massive ship was pulling forward. The Vorgoth Dread Carrier. The largest warship the Empire had ever built. 5 times bigger than the flagship they had destroyed. Its main cannon lit up. A giant red sun forming at its core. Mara whispered, her voice trembling. "Sir, that weapon. It could destroy a continent." Rena turned pale. "How do we stop that?" Ariv looked at the railgun. Still hot. Still unstable. One more shot could destroy the Resolute. He met his crew's eyes. "We stop it," he said quietly. "Or humanity dies today." The dread carrier's cannon grew brighter. The Resolute's railgun hummed weakly. The two weapons, one ancient, one human, were seconds away from deciding the fate of the system. The glow from the Vorgoth dread carrier lit up half the screen. Its supercannon grew brighter, forming a burning sphere of red energy. It looked like a new sun rising in the darkness, one meant to erase entire worlds. Inside the Resolute, the bridge fell silent. Every officer felt the heat from the enemy weapon through the screens, as if space itself was shaking. Rena whispered, "Commander, if that cannon fires, we won't even feel pain. We'll just disappear." Mara clenched her fists. "We can't stop that. No ship can." Ariv Keller didn't look away from the display. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, pushing through fear. "How long until it fires?" he asked. The sensor officer's voice trembled. 30 seconds, sir. Too fast. Far too fast." The railgun was still glowing from the last shot. Heat warnings pulsed red on the side screens. The engineer shook his head. "Commander, the railgun cannot fire. If we push it again, the coil will melt or explode. It will destroy us." Mara stared at Ariv. "Sir, we have no weapon left." Ariv finally turned. "We still have one." The crew looked confused. "What weapon?" Rena asked. Ariv walked toward the center console. "The weapon the Vorgoth fear the most," he said quietly. The bridge went still. Then Ariv finished. "Human unpredictability." No one understood at first. Then Ariv entered new commands into the thruster controls. The crew gasped. Mara stepped forward. "Sir, are you serious? That maneuver is insane." Ariv didn't stop typing. "That is why it will work." Rena read the screen and turned pale. "You want to fly directly at the dread carrier?" "Yes. That's suicide." Ariv looked at her sharply. "It is what they will never expect." The Vorgoth were masters of pattern, masters of structure, masters of discipline. But humans broke patterns. Humans acted without warning. Humans did the impossible simply because everyone believed they couldn't. Ariv raised his hand. "Full power to engines." Rena hesitated for half a second, then pushed the thrusters. The Resolute roared forward. The ship shook harder than ever before, engines screaming from the strain. Panels rattled. Sparks dropped from the ceiling. The crew held onto rails as the ship cut through space like a spear. On the enemy screens, the Resolute suddenly appeared as a fast-moving blur. The Vorgoth fleet reacted late. Very late. Sensor officer. "Commander, the enemy ships are confused. They are breaking formation again." Ariv nodded. "They think we are retreating. Or panic charging. They don't understand." Because the Resolute was aiming straight at the dread carrier's cannon mouth. The largest weapon ever built by the Empire. The place no sane captain would ever fly toward. The enemy fleet scrambled to realign. Dozens of ships moved to intercept. Multiple warships approaching. Mara warned. Ariv replied. "Rena, thread the gaps. Don't fight them. Don't turn. Just move." Rena's hands danced across controls. The Resolute zigzagged through the narrow space between enemy warships. Red plasma beams passed inches from the hull. Explosions shook the side panels. One small frigate fired at them. Boom! A glancing hit tore more armor away. "Shields at 3%, someone shouted. Ariv kept watching the dread carrier's glowing core. "Distance to target?" he asked. The sensor officer answered, 400,000 kilometers. Closing fast." Ariv's voice didn't change. "Keep going." The dread carrier's cannon grew brighter and brighter, so bright the screen turned orange. 20 seconds until fire," the sensor officer yelled. Mara shouted, "Commander, if that cannon fires while we're this close." "We won't be close," Ariv said calmly. "We will be inside its blind angle." "Inside what?" Rena gasped. Arif pointed to the spinning rings around the dread carrier's cannon, huge rotating structures that focused its energy. "Get under those rings," he said. "They cannot fire while focusing." The crew froze. That space was tiny, almost impossible to reach. But Arif's voice cut through the fear. "Rena! Now!" She pushed the controls. The Resolute dove downward at full speed, slicing under the turning metal arcs. The dread carrier's cannon, now fully charged, tried to track them, but its rings blocked the beam from firing downward. Mara's eyes widened. It worked. They can't shoot. But the moment of relief lasted 1 second, because now the enemy fleet panicked. Every ship fired at once. A storm of red plasma beams shot toward the Resolute. The bridge shook violently. The left wing of the ship tore apart. The lights went out for 2 seconds. "Shields gone," the officer cried. "Hull damage everywhere." Arif didn't look back. "How long until railgun coil is stable?" The engineer checked with shaking hands. 12 seconds, maybe. Arif looked forward. The Resolute was now directly under the dread carrier's massive cannon. A perfect angle for one final shot. If the railgun could fire. If it didn't explode. He leaned forward. "We need that shot in 12 seconds. Outside the window, the dread carrier's weapon hummed, trying to reposition, its rings turning faster and faster. 12 seconds until humanity's hope either fired or died. The Resolute shook like a wounded animal as it crawled under the giant cannon rings of the Vorgoth dread carrier. The entire bridge glowed red from warning lights. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Panels blinked or went dark. The crew looked bruised, exhausted, and terrified. But Commander Arif Keller stood tall. His eyes were locked on the monster above them, the biggest weapon the Empire had ever made. The sensor officer shouted over the alarms. "Commander! Enemy ships! Closing fast! 5 cruisers behind us, 2 destroyers on our right." Mara gripped her chair. "If they hit us again, the ship will break." Arif didn't blink. "How long until the railgun is ready?" The engineer stared at his screen like it was a miracle. 6 seconds, 5, 4. Rena held the controls with shaking hands, fighting to keep the Resolute in the narrow safe zone under the spinning cannon rings. Every second, the rings turned faster. Every second, the dread carrier's weapon tried to adjust. If it locked on, they were done. The bridge shook again as another plasma blast struck the hull. The sensor officer screamed. "We lost the port thruster." Rena gasped. "That means I can't hold this angle for long." Arif stepped closer to the front window. The giant weapon above them looked like a sun about to explode. The engineer shouted, "Commander! Railgun coil is stable." Arif didn't waste a heartbeat. "Charge it!" The railgun hummed deep within the ship. The same hum that froze an entire war fleet earlier. But this time, the sound was weaker. Rough. As if the weapon itself was struggling to survive. The energy rose higher and higher. Rena yelled, "Commander! The dread carrier is rotating. The safe angle is closing." Arif placed his hand on the back of her chair. "Hold it for 10 seconds. She swallowed. "I'll try." "No," Arif said firmly. "You will do it." Rena nodded, determination replacing fear. The engineer called out, "Charging at 80%, 90. A plasma blast hit the Resolute's right side. The bridge lights flickered. Panels exploded. Rena's console sparked. "We're losing control," she cried. Arif grabbed the rail near her seat to keep himself steady. "Just hold the nose up," he ordered. "That's all you need to do." 98%. 99. The railgun core screamed like a beast in pain. "Commander!" the engineer shouted. 100%. "We're ready." Arif pointed upward at the giant weapon. "Fire." Nothing happened. A beat of silence. The engineer looked horrified. "The coil is jammed. It's overheated again." The crew stared in shock. No weapon. No shields. No escape. The Empire's supercannon finished its rotation. Its rings aligned perfectly. Arif whispered, "Not yet." Then, with a sound like the universe cracking open. Boom! The Resolute fired. A violent blast of white-blue energy shot upward, ripping through the underside of the dread carrier's cannon. The railgun coil melted instantly, shattering the weapon as it fired, but the shot had already left the barrel. The beam tore through metal, cutting through energy rings, burning through the cannon core. For one blinding second, the whole sky turned white. Then silence. The enemy superweapon stopped glowing. A thin crack appeared along its surface. Then another. Then, Kraraok! The entire cannon split open like a bursting star. Flaming fragments launched in every direction. Shockwaves rippled across space. Enemy ships were thrown away like toys. The dread carrier, the Empire's pride, the unbreakable fortress, began to sink. Its engines died. Its armor cracked. Its lights faded. The Empire's strongest weapon, destroyed by a single human shot. On the Resolute's bridge, smoke filled the air. The crew coughed, bleeding, shaken, but alive. Rena whispered in disbelief. We actually stopped it. Mara stared at Ariv. Commander, that shot destroyed our railgun. We can't fire again. Ariv nodded. I know. The sensor officer suddenly gasped. Sir, the entire Vorgoth fleet. They're retreating. Every enemy warship was turning, engines at full power, fleeing deeper into the system. They weren't regrouping. They weren't planning a counterattack. They were running. Humans had done what no one in the galaxy thought possible. Ariv finally allowed himself to breathe. They won't return soon, he said, because today, they learned something. Mara asked softly, what did they learn? Ariv watched the enemy ships flee until they became distant lights. They learned that humanity doesn't need the biggest fleet. He looked at the smoking remains of the railgun. We only need one good shot, at the right moment. The crew sat in silence, letting the truth sink in. The war wasn't over. But today, humanity had proved something to the entire galaxy. Humans may break, bend, bleed, but when cornered, they strike harder than any empire ever imagined.